My name is Nancy Roberts, and I'm an economics professor at Arizona State University. Today, I want to build a simple model that explains a couple of concepts that are very important in economics. The concept of opportunity cost and the fact that everything involves trade-offs. And so what I've done here is I'm looking at an economy, a very simple economy, that produces only two goods. This economy has some resources. They have some land, they have some labor, they have some capital, and they can use these resources to produce either clothing or food. And if they use all of their resources in the production of clothing, then they can produce, I'll just call this point A, they can produce 100 units of clothing per time period, but of course they couldn't produce any food because they have all of their resources in the clothing industry. If they want to produce some food, they're going to have to give up some of the clothing they're making. They're going to have to move some of the resources that are in the clothing industry over into the food industry. And so I've indicated another position where this economy could be. They could give up 4 units of clothing and in return get 25 units of food. Move some resources out, get some food. Here's another move they could make. They could give up more clothing and get more food. And so, in fact, what I've done here, let me label these, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. G has all of the resources in the food industry, which means every time period they could make 150 units of food. But of course they couldn't have any clothing because all of the resources are in the food industry. Okay, so what this chart indicates is the cost of moving from one position to another. Let's just draw a graph of this production possibilities curve, and I'll put food down here on this axis, and I'll put clothing up here, and 100 and 150. So my production possibilities curve looks like this, and this would be point A, which is 100 units of clothing and no food. This would be point G. Let's put another point in there. Let's put D in there. 50, 75, that'd be right here. 75 and 75. This is point D. And B, C, D, E, F, the other points here, which I haven't marked. Now, sometimes students will ask, well, where should we be? Should we be at point D because we're making equal amounts of clothing and food? From an economist's perspective, where we should be is somewhere on this curve. Because if you are producing anywhere on this curve, you are using all of your resources and all of your technology. And so, from an economist's perspective, we're concerned with efficiency. Efficiency means you're producing on this curve. You can't produce out here because in any given time period, a production possibilities curve or a production possibilities frontier basically tells you what is possible given technology, given the resources. If technology increases, if resources increase, then your curve can increase. Your productive capabilities can increase. But if this is the state of our resources and our technology right now, then here's what's possible. If we start out producing at A and we say, my goodness, we're hungry and we have no food, we should probably give up some clothing and get some food. And so what we must do is we must move resources from the clothing industry over into the food industry. And what you'll notice is from A to B, we gain 25 units of food, and it only costs us 4 units of clothing. If we decide 25 units of food isn't enough, we need more food, then we could move from B to C, in which case we gain another 25 units of food. But what you will notice is that it cost us more to make this move from B to C than it did from A to B, and yet the gain was the same. So what it cost us here was 96 to 88. I'm having trouble here. 8. Cost us 8 units. So we gave up 8 units of clothing, and in return we gained 25 units of food. We could make another move from C to D, and this time we're giving up 13 units of clothing, and we're still getting another 25 units of food. So what's happening as we move from A to G, as we move from here along here, not only is there a cost and a gain, but that cost is an increasing cost. And so, and it doesn't matter if we started at G and moved this way, we're also going to exhibit, each time we move from G to F to E to D, we give up another 25 units of food, but we gain smaller and smaller amounts of clothing. And again, this illustrates this idea of not only opportunity cost, but increasing opportunity cost. The reason we have increasing opportunity cost, well, number one is because of the way I've written the numbers here, but the way I've written these numbers here illustrates an economic reality. And the economic reality is that resources, inputs, are not perfect substitutes in the production process. Some people are really good, and some resources are really good in the production of food. Other resources are much more productive in the clothing industry. So if we're at A and we're going to move to B, that means we're going to have to take some resources out of clothing. Okay, let's just assume that we have somebody here making clothing who's a perfect seamstress. She's magnificent at making clothes. If we have to move resources out of clothing and into food, we're not going to move her, because she's our very best clothing maker. We're not going to move her here either. We're saving her down to the very last. And when we actually have to move her, our most efficient manufacturer of clothing, we're only going to get 25 more units of food, and we have to give up 30 units of clothing. So what this says, this increasing opportunity cost, what it says is that resources in the production process are not perfect substitutes. If you just think about growing grapes, we can grow grapes in Scotland. We can grow grapes in the south of France. Where are grapes grown? They're grown in the south of France because the land and the climate in the south of France is much more conducive to growing grapes than is the land and the climate in Scotland. And so resources are not perfect substitutes in the production process, which gives us this bowed out production possibilities curve. If we discover some kind, well, let's look at a point, let me see, 30. Where's 30? Right here. Let's look at this point, 30 and 75. I'm going to call this point J. At point J, I'm making 30 units of clothing and 75 units of food. This is inefficient. I have the resources to make 75 units of food and 75 units of clothing, and I'm only making 30. This means I've got people who are unemployed. I've got factories that are sitting idle. I've got resources that are not being used. If I'm a J, I could continue to make 30 units of clothing and have 125 units of food, which is out here. So in fact, if I'm producing at J, I'm giving up all of this. So any spot where an economy is producing inside the production possibilities curve, they have unemployed resources. Any spot out here is not possible unless we discover some new technology, some new fertilizer that in fact makes our land more productive. And if we have this new resource, this new technology, my production possibilities curve is going to do this. It's going to increase this way. Look, that new fertilizer doesn't do anything for the clothing. So I can still only have 100 units of clothing. But the new fertilizer allows me to produce more food because of this increasing technology. So increasing resources sometimes will have a concentric shift of the production possibilities curve. Sometimes this new technology will only affect one industry or the other, and we'll get this asymmetrical shift. At any rate, what the production possibilities curve model shows us is that there are trade-offs, and that the trade-off is the cost, and we talk about it in terms of the opportunity cost, which is what you had to give up to get the gain. And in this model, we can see that they're increasing opportunity costs. We'll talk more about this later. Goodbye.
Nice.